So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Light Bytes. This is our third Light Bytes event. For those who don't know about Light Bytes, it's a new initiative we've started at ETC London. It will eventually be the first Friday of every month. There will be a Light Bytes event. This year, we're doing it every other month, just while we're building up a little bit of momentum. But as of next year, first Friday of every month, there will be a Light Bytes event, and topics will sort of change constantly. So please feel free to keep an eye on the website, and we'll keep you updated as that goes. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and really big thank you to our panel who's with us. So I'm just going to run through the panel who are here and say a quick hello, and then we will jump in. So I'm just going to go through them as you appear on my screen. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully that puts us all in a sort of better view. Lucy, you first on my screen. So hello, thank you very much. Welcome, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
I've been lucky enough to have been your associate on a show, so I'm really glad that you're able to have been here, so thank you. Charlie, hello, welcome, thank you for joining us. Appreciate having you here. Durham, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. It's great to have you here. Mark, Jonathan, hi, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. And Elliot, hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is Declan Randall. I am the training program coordinator for ETC. I look after the UK and the EU territories. We're just waiting for a couple more of our designers to join us. We're waiting for Joe Town, Rick Fisher, and Peter Mumford, who are struggling with the links. We are trying to sort that out as best we can. But I'm going to kick it off since you're all here. So thank you for joining us. So I'm going to kick it off with an easy question, just to get us going. And that is, do you have a favorite color? What is it, and is that a color that you're still able to use in the world of LED, or have you had to make changes? I don't know who wants to jump into that one first.
I absolutely know that Paul Walmsley is watching this, and he will be shouting at his screen, blue and orange, blue and orange. So yeah, I love 120, Lee 120 and Lee 777. They are two of my absolute favorite colors in the whole world. And you know, staples like 200 and stuff, but my go-to are 777 and 120. And when it comes to LEDs, 120 in my head is sort of full blue. It's probably not in reality, but that's what it looks like in LEDs. And then 777, Paul Walmsley makes something brilliant for me.
Brilliant.
And I say your nay.
Sorry, I do apologize. Because you're not on camera, Graham, I forgot to introduce you, so please forgive me. We have Graham Parker from the ETC office, who is helping me to wrangle our questions to our panel. So thank you, Graham, for joining us. I apologize for leaving you off the introduction list. Very rude of me. I seem to be on a real roll today in terms of getting it right. Joe Town has just joined us, I believe. Hi, Joe. Sorry for the mix-up on the link. I do apologize. Everybody, this is Joe Town, who's just joined us. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I was a bit late because the dog had stolen the Ethernet cable as well. So
that's all good. Not helped by me sending out the incorrect link. So, Joe, the question I've put to the panel, and I'll put it out again to see you've joined us, is do you have a favorite color or colors? What are they? And are you still able to replicate those colors now that we're in LED world?
My favorite color is Lee 197.
Alice Blue, yeah.
Alice Blue, and I like a bit of 197 with a bit of 201 added to it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's terrible on the burnout, but absolutely love the combo. And some people would say that 714 is probably a bit close to that now. It's just not quite the same as putting that bit of 201 in. On the warm side, I really like the 763 range, 763, nice. 765, but usually the 6364.
That's probably a tricky color to get out of LED, I would think.
It probably is, yeah. I'm a real lover of warm colors, and using sort of the 152 sort of, I mean, I tend to go more the Roscoe range of 03, that sort of area, but those sort of 152, 154 colours just are beautiful on skin, and they are nigh on impossible to recreate.
Absolutely. Rick, hi, you've joined us. Thank you very much. So sorry for the mix-up on the links and things. Your microphone is muted. I think we can't actually hear you at the moment.
I think that's really interesting, Joe, because I can't be doing with warm colours. I try often to use open white in my rigs, and I end up going, oh, no, I don't like it. Please get some 201, please get some 201.
No, so, beat a bit of open white.
It's so interesting, but I think my favourite Lee colour is 241. So I'm a bit of a green girl.
That's why we get on so well. Love a bit of green.
And when I'm mixing with LED, I don't get anal about whether it's really 241. I tend to just mix a colour that really speaks to me at that moment and what I need, and then call it, oh, that's 241. And my programmer will go, really? And I'll say, well, that's what 241 looks like in my head today.
Yeah.
And I might then spend the next week during technical going, oh, that 241's not right, and mix it again. That's my favourite.
I remember years ago, Mark, you came out to South Africa to the State Theatre and you did a chat, and you told us that your favourite colour was 161. Has that moved on?
Well, that's very interesting. It moved on. I don't know whether Lee 200 had been invented then.
No, it probably hadn't.
Nelson Mandela had just got in. But certainly I was brought up by Robert Bryan, who certainly favoured 161 in Act 4 of The Marriage of Figaro. But I was wondering whether one's taste changes with age, because I was very turned on by the rich blues. Charlie talked about Lee 120, I think, which was certainly used to be in my rigs. Or was it that the lights, it's so yellow that you needed Lee 120 to actually get some sort of blueness out the front end? What I do struggle with, Declan, or I did a couple of years ago, I was using generics and LED had arrived. I think it was at Garsington, and I struggled around the Lee 200 161 area to get the two things to work together. Now, I think LEDs have improved a bit since then. Certainly at ETC, the lusters have been wonderful, I think. Quick mention for our sponsor there.
Absolutely, thank you. Nice plug. I see we've also, Peter Mumford has just joined us as well. So I'd just like to say a quick hello to Peter. Thank you very much, Peter. Sorry about the mix-up on the link, but it's lovely to have you with us. Sorry, Mark, I interrupted you.
Not at all. I was waffling on about trying to get tungsten Lee 200 to match with LED 200. But
it's tricky.
You think you have to decide one thing or the other and make the other thing go with it.
Don't you find though that for every show that it completely changes? So you think, I found the perfect Lee 200 now, and I'm going to save that, and I take the disc away and I go, put this in the show file because this is these are the 200s I really love today. And then you switch them on with that set and that costume, and you go, that's not the one I had last week. They go, yes, it is, Joe, because everything completely changes with the perception of what you've got around you.
Definitely. I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Durham, how do you sort of deal with colour? Because it's, I mean, gels, I'm sure, don't really sort of feature much on the sort of big outdoor rigs. I mean, everything's probably LED or discharge source. So what's your sort of approach when you're sort of picking colours?
Yeah, I mean, the LEDs, when they first took prevalence, really, we didn't use them as often as we could have done because they just didn't match up to anything that we were producing with discharge lighting or daylight that was then filtered. And it was interesting that in the development with Fred Foster of the ETC lusters and the sort of 7 lenses of the different colours, if you produce a magenta with CMY and you produce a magenta with RGB, they both look the same on the wall, but they're completely different components of light. So the same thing goes if you produce white light with LED, with a luster, for example, then you've got an opportunity, because you can make certain frequencies in that white light spectrum zing. So costume designers can make the gold thread in that. It looks white on the model or the actress, but the gold will really zing. And we call that spectral equalization, which is like everyone's got a graphic equalizer when we used to have bass and treble. And now designers have got the opportunity to fine tune even white light to make certain frequencies really sing. My favorite color, when we went to Lee, I was quite surprised to see that their best-selling color ever was 106. And given what's happening on Monday, I think that's a good one to have in our mind at the moment. But my all-time favorite, Durham Frost. They had Hampshire Frost and all that, so I was allowed, as I got a county name, and that's my immortality. Durham Frost. Thank you.
Fair enough.
I use Durham Frost a lot. I love it in power cans, actually. It does a really good job.
Yeah, we did a sort of special lavender version as well, 136 combined, and also a 201 version, so you didn't have to double up with your color correction and your frost as well, because they would all burn out. So yeah, we had quite a good time. But yeah, 106, most popular color. Amazing.
Good. Yes, it's interesting the note about red light that's coming back into the equation. I think that's a good thing. I think we've been sold the information of sort of how good LED is, but that sort of blue light that lies as a base under LED that gets the phosphor coating is actually quite bad for us. So it'll be interesting to see where the red light debate ends up going. Yeah,
just a word of warning as well with LED. Quite often you get a better color out of LED by using the white output and then filtering it.
Right.
Rather than trying to balance it with RGBW or RGBA. Because you're actually taking out the right frequencies of light to produce the color. And it's subtractive rather than trying to be additive with colors that don't have those frequencies in them.
Great. I see we've got Peter just joined us in the room. Hello, Peter. Sorry for the struggle. I see your microphone is still on mute. We can see you, so we're not hearing you just yet. But welcome and thank you for joining us.
I see you through some Durham Frost by the look of it. Oh, there you go. Hi, Peter.
So next question I want to throw out to everybody is the chat about assistants and associates. What do you see as the difference between an assistant and associate? Do you use them? Are they useful? Is it something you think is going to become more prevalent, and are producers, so it's like 10,000 questions all rolled into one, and are producers coming round to the idea that this is something that should be budgeted and planned for? Rick, how about you?
Well, it's interesting. When I work in the States, which I don't do that often, but you're assumed that you'll always have an assistant or an associate. If you're working on Broadway, you usually have both. The way that they tend to separate the jobs is that the assistant is really there to be kind of an information data manager, keeping up with the lists, keeping up with any kind of notation that's done, any kind of work lists that are done, making sure the plan is absolutely up to date with any kind of last minute changes or additions or subtractions or whatever. And that they are producing at the end of the process the Bible. That means that, 3 chimpanzees and a lighting designer could perhaps put the show on again. Usually just 2 chimpanzees with a 3rd chimpanzee who is the lighting designer. And the associate is a bit more of managing the team, managing the work call, managing notes, what has to be done. And basically, if you give a lot of notes, the associate may actually go up and action those notes. Like, I want to refocus that light or adjust a shutter cut or sort out this, that, the other thing on that focus. They might do that even without you. There, the designer is treated a little bit more like, oh, you don't have to worry your pretty little head over those sorts of things. Sometimes I find that rather frustrating because, of course, I'm just used to doing it myself. And I have stood on a stage on Broadway with them going through their binders of what there are, and I've got my plan with my coffee stains on it saying, I want channel 75 up at 60%, please, while I just adjust the cut. And they're going, looking at which electric it's on and trying to cross-reference it all with Light Bytes. And so there are times when it goes a bit crazy. And you can sometimes feel in the States that you're a little bit overstaffed. But then with the system that they have, you almost wonder how you can survive without them in the UK. Where in the UK, you largely have to fight, kill, scrape, or pay yourself to have anybody work with you. And that's a bit of a shame. We're working against that, and on bigger shows, it's now more common to do it. I notice some of our leading lighting designers often work with a co-lighting designer as a way of getting and future-proofing the assistant associate. I think associate has a little bit more status than an assistant, and so one chooses those terms reflecting on what the job's been done, and sometimes you reevaluate that before the final billing is sorted out in programs. I often, famously on Billy Elliot, where I asked for an assistant, they wouldn't budget for one because it was a small show that was never going to make any money, and was never going to be done again because it was too British, and all that. So we actually got an intern funded by somebody else who ended up calling follow spots and doing some paperwork, although she was there to learn what it was like to work in the commercial theater. And I made my programmer, the very wonderful now Vic Pine, my associate and programmer, and made sure that she had billing on posters as such. But I'm glad to see, and a little plug for the ALD boot camp, which is going to be running towards the end of July, which is going to be a chance to introduce to some of our members the experience of some of our other members and some non-members of what the assistant associate roles are, what they should be doing. I've seen a draft schedule for this event, and I'll tell you, if you've got a week of your time to adjust and to go into it, you can save yourself a lot of time and money of going to drama schools, and just sign up for that, and I think you'll get an amazing amount of experience if it goes well. It's a very ambitious and exciting program. So that's the ALD plug there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Elias and Charlie, when you guys were starting out, do you think it's important to assist and be associates? Have you ever been assistants and associates? Do you just jump straight into design? What was your sort of roots into the industry?
I mean, sorry, Ed, do you want to go first, Elliot? Sorry.
Let's say you go first. After you.
When I was starting out, I wrote to everybody, every lighting designer that I could, every producer that I could, and did lots of work experience. But I think I'm probably far too opinionated to be an actual associate. So I never was. My route was doing lots and lots of small shows, and getting to know people and building relationships, and then eventually somebody said, would you come and light this show? And I thought, oh, you're asking me, that's nice. Yes, very good, I will. But no, I wish I could have been an associate, because I think I would have been where I am faster, but too opinionated.
Fair enough.
I'm sort of similar. I never really assisted or associated anyone apart from at drama school. That was about it. I just sort of, again, did very small shows and worked my way up. I think it's a shame that we don't have more of it in the UK, because I think really it's a great way to progress career-wise and to actually get the experience, because the small, like the couple of times I did assist at drama school was some of the best training that I had in how to lighting design from an experienced designer. So I think it's something we really need to push for going forwards.
I think that's true. When I was I worked at the vaudeville for years as a board up, and so every 3 months there would be a brand new lighting designer. And whilst I wasn't the associate, I got to see how lighting designers worked, and that was fascinating. Yeah, I mean, genuinely fascinating, and it helped build how I would light shows.
Yeah, Peter, I know. I mean, I've been your associate. I was your associate on 42nd Street, and I know that you have a very close working relationship with your programmer, who's often Vic Brennan. I know you use other programmers as well. And it feels to me that Vic almost sort of fills the role for you of an associate to a certain degree. Is that fair, do you think, to say?
No, well, I mean, Vic has worked as my associate. I mean, on Kong in Australia, she was my associate. She was co-associate in New York on that. So, yeah, that's true to some extent. But, I mean, I think what I would say in terms of the original question is that I would regard an associate as being somebody who could actually sit in my seat if I'm not there. I would look for an associate to be somebody who, if the show is going to, I don't know, Japan or Australia or whatever, if I couldn't go, they could, and I would trust them to do that. And I think it's interesting what Charlie said about not being too opinionated. I actually quite like an associate to have opinions. I actually think that's really important. I like them to be my opinions, but but you know what I'm saying. I want somebody who's got imagination and flair, but also understands what I'm trying to do. But also somebody who I would absolutely trust, and I include Declan in that actually.
Thank you.
To look after that show if I'm not there, that's an associate for me, a genuine associate. An assistant is somebody down the ladder from that, but a very valuable asset nonetheless, who can actually assist us with easing the process, with taking us through a lot of kind of, if you like, hack work to some extent, but also contributory. I mean, my feeling is that everybody in my team should be creative. They should have, if they're in my team, they have a creative role and a contributive role. Provided I agree with it. No, I don't really mean that. But you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Darren, on the sort of shows that you do, on the sort of scale that you do, I assume there's quite a sort of strong team that you sort of pull together. Is that how you sort of approach your projects?
Yeah, absolutely. And strangely enough, more often than not, I end up being the associate. Because if we're working abroad on, say, in Rio, there was a Mexican lighting designer who the creative team wanted to get involved, and we wanted to get him involved, and he wanted to get involved to sort of learn as much as he could. So we allowed him to be the lighting designer, and I was the associate, and sort of in the background as far as their creative team was concerned. And hopefully once the Olympics circus has moved on, we left a legacy with him. He's now a very, very hard-working Brazilian lighting designer. So it's quite interesting that politically, sometimes I have to take a back seat to the local guys. So it's important for us when we do those things to leave a legacy, although in some occasions, like, for example, in Abu Dhabi, I was talking with the princess about this idea of leaving a legacy of training and asked her if anyone in her family would be interested in learning about lighting for rock and roll and sound systems. And she said, well, unfortunately, we're still 3 or 4 generations away from that, which is quite interesting. They didn't want to get their hands dirty. I mean, originally I was an assistant to like Joe Davis and Andy Bridge and Robert Ormbo. And my memory of that process is that in the pub, the associate takes the order, the assistant goes to get it, the LD pays for it.
That seems a fair analogy, I think. Yeah. What would you say, and I'll run through the whole panel on this because I think everybody's approach will be slightly different, but if you could sort of sum up your broad strokes approach to a project, what would you say that is? Do you start, do you tend to previs things? Do you draw by hand and have other people draw plots? Do you like to draw your own plots? What's your sort of process for that? Mark, I'll start with you because you're sort of first on my screen at the moment. Sorry, short straw.
I muted myself. Am I back on?
You are.
Broad strokes. Well, gosh, it's a big question, isn't it?
It is a little bit.
Who's going to answer it better than me? It's very hard to have a lot of the conversations with other members of the creative team until you're actually doing it. because we can have quite a detailed conversation. We had one about colour, and we all knew what we were talking about when we said 200 or 120 or 201. And if you start talking to designers or directors, it gets a bit vague about what they understand. So sometimes I think I'm cooking up all sorts of ideas which aren't going to get seen or approved of really until I'm in the theatre, but it does depend on the creative team that you're working with, which of course is lovely. Going back to the last question, you've got assistants, associates to bounce ideas off. I sketch on the plan, I'll sketch it out with a pencil, and then it'll get converted to a plan. But I'll do that game of chess. I mean, there are different situations that we're in where we're given a list of equipment, and we have to work out how to use that list the best way. Or we're in a situation where I'm sure Paul's in that situation where he can just say whatever he wants, and he can have it.
Fair enough. Charlie, you're next on my screen.
I suppose my broad strokes is I work a lot in opera and musical theatre, so I tend to listen to it first, and that is my initial, depending, no matter what the set is going to be or the direction is going to be, that tends to be where initial colours come from, initial, even angles of light come from. I listen to stuff and jot down everything I possibly can in a score, and then cross it all out when we have meetings with set designers and directors. But you know, like Mark said, you know, I'm lucky to work with lots of the same people, and so I don't tend to have to say, this is the colour we're going to go with. They just sort of trust me now, which is lovely. But it can be very difficult if you're trying to explain lighting to people, because it's not, you can't do a model box. I mean, you can wig stuff up, but it's very expensive, and I'm woefully inept technically to do that.
It's also not really the same though, is it? Because you know, with the wig screens, particularly with color, I find is where they fall down, because they're very much an RGB based system. And if you choose a primary green, for instance, I don't know why I picked green, just for Lucy and me there. You know, if you pick a 139, it's actually quite a deep saturated green, but it's not on the screen. It's that really vicious, vivid screen. Yeah. And I find you spend most of your time having conversations with directors going, no, it's not actually going to look like that. Trust me, won't. And then as soon as you start that, the whole process for me is sort of falls apart. Sometimes I'll take a picture of a model box and then draw some terrible pencil lines over the top of it, which it can be helpful. Okay, that's nice. But it's very rare, and my drawing is appalling. So. Rick, you're next up on my screen.
Okay. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. I think I'm not muted. Well, I'll come out of the closet and say I absolutely hate drawing lighting plans. It is the worst part of the entire process of working in the theater and being a lighting designer for me. And the blank piece of paper, still 40 years in, completely terrifies me. And I will do anything. I have been known to clean the house and work on my taxes other than doing lighting design. So if I had my druthers, if I could spend the rest of my career working in rep rigs with a bit of flexibility to move things around, I think I'd be actually very happy with the constraints of that. So be that as it may, how do I start? And I really start to figure out where I can deliver light from and what kind of light I want that to be. And slowly, you know, in a sense, it's positions where the light can actually hit the stage or hit the piece of scenery or hit the area of the stage that works for me. Then I build in as much flexibility into that area by different types of light or different shapes of light, whether it's a profile or a parcan or a wash light. And I put as much flexibility into those different areas where I think are useful angles. And then I fill up the plan with that. And then the budget hits or the equipment list hits, and I start taking away again and trying to refine my work that way. It's a set of, I liken it to what I imagine the old-fashioned painters were like, where they would go to when they take the palette and put lots of dabs of paint on it, not necessarily knowing which paint they were going to use, but having them all available to then apply in the moment. And so that's kind of what I do. So I increasingly try and put together a rig of opportunities more than a rig of ideas, which is different than my fringe days when I used to have very little lights to work with. So you had to put up ideas because you didn't have enough lights to have opportunities. We're lucky that we have a bit more flexibility. The introduction of LEDs, when we can get them, means that we don't have to necessarily choose colors the way we used to, even though we can't always get the colors we want out of the LEDs, to reference your earlier conversation. But so I guess that's my process, and I then have to trust that in the moment, and I equally share Charlie's and Mark's frustration with how you talk about it to your creative teams. I basically just try and talk in terms of moods or ideas or rhythms more than specifics of colors, because they're not interested. They don't visualize them the way that we do, and nobody cares. They just want to see the results.
I genuinely got a job once, Rick, by saying that I was excellent at sad lighting.
Well, there you go. You learned the key word that triggered somebody to say, yeah, okay, he knows what we need. I think whereas my lighting is often just sad.
I would certainly disagree with that. Jeremy, how about you? I suspect your process is probably quite wildly different.
Oh, you're muted, Durham.
Sorry, I was banging the window as a pigeon after my nuts. 50% of the work that I do is actually in the virtual world, and that's 50% paid work as a lighting designer is done in the virtual world. Quite often on the large scale events, you're having to explain to people with no visual imagination whatsoever, i.e. accountants, what it is you're going to spend all this money on. And if they take a swathe of the budget out in their value engineering, I can use WYSIWYG to darken a third of the stadium and show them what's going to be the result of that cost. And they say, well, I don't want that. So, all right, well, you have to pay for it. But in terms of the process, I also think it's important for young lighting designers, if you're going to use WYSIWYG or Dépense, charge for it. Tell your client you've got a studio that produces these animations, even if you do it yourself, and charge them something to help boost your fee and also to help you afford the software in the first place. The process of lighting in stadiums, a stadium is just a theatre in the round. And my main principle is KISS. Keep it absolutely simple. So where in the theatre we might use a couple of 223s, showing my age, on channel 1 with a bit of 106 in as tab warmers, in Torino on the Olympics for Pavarotti's last rendition of Nessun Dorma, we had 25k mole phase, which came out of little holes in the ground to light Mark Fisher's amazing Sipario curtain that swept aside to reveal Pavarotti. And again, this was just channel 1. It was tab warmers. It was just rather a lot more power involved. So keeping it simple allows me to run the systems and not the systems to run away with us. And just one more thing about WYSIWYG. Dépense is very good as well, but I use WYSIWYG, I've done from its inception, is that very often in the stadium environment, you cannot use the lighting rig. You can't see it because it's daylight. It's not been rigged. It's out of view. Or as happened to us in Rio, they forgot to budget for the petrol for the generators and we didn't have any diesel overnight. So WYSIWYG was important, absolutely vital. We also have each station of programming, 4 programmers with their own WYSIWYG system, so they can see the results of what they're doing at their desk, even though they can't physically see the fixtures. So it's really important to us. But make sure you charge your client if you're going to use expensive technology.
Fair enough. Joe, how about you?
Hi, well, I'm the complete opposite end of that spectrum. I deal mainly in regional theatre, and therefore a lot of all my kit is preset. I know exactly what's on the equipment list and stuff with a small amount of hires. But I approach it by, I read the script first and then I write down everything I would want to do on that production if I was designing the whole show myself, if it was my concept. And then I take it to the design meetings with the director and everything and just hold that information in my head. And if the two can meld together, then I'll make those suggestions at the design meetings. And then once I've seen the design and we've discussed it and all of that, I collect a lot of books and photos together to use as reference material to talk to the non-creative part of the team and try and express what I want to visualize. And then I write everything down. So I start with a cue list, in fact, and that cue list may be scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, and then that layers through the weeks. But I then draw everything myself. I love sections. Sections are my absolute. I actually start with a section and not a plan, because I try and work out what the light's going to do and how it's going to hit the actor and how it's going to work on the set, and then decide where it needs to go on the stage. And I don't think you can do that unless you see it as a real 3D object. And I'm getting more and more where I will draw something up into 3D or get an assistant to do it for me, and then I use the drawing that's been made to 3D everything up with the lights to I won't do a whole show. I'll do 5 or 6 lights and see what they're doing and see where they play and how they react. But I'll go through the cue sheet and design my plan from that cue sheet with all the ideas written down. Then that breaks down into smaller cues, and I constantly rejig the plan until the last minute, and then so I'll hold on to the plan till I absolutely have to give it in. One of the other things I'll do with my plan is I will draw everything I want to do, everything, every little nuance, every idea, and then I look at the kit list. So I don't actually look at the kit list until I have to start thinking about hires and things like that. So I'll just draw profile. That's the beauty of CAD. I'll draw a whole load of generic source 4s and a whole load of generic Fresnels and PARs and floods and just shove everything on, all the ideas onto the plan. And then I'll go, right, I've got X number of 19s. What am I going? What is important? What do I have to hold on to? What is the idea that has to remain? And start just breaking it all down. But I think what's happened with being able to draw electronically is that it has completely freed up that process of just going mad and then making it fit later on, which I really enjoy.
Great, thank you. Lucy, how about yourself?
I start with so I started in abstract art, so I developed a system for myself that I then kind of adapt when I work in all other mediums, really. But I start with the ideas massively. It's very conceptual conversations with the creative team about the piece as a whole, what we want it to say as a whole, and then what we want each individual section to do and say. And it's all quite cerebral, really. I research a lot around the topic, and as I research, even just a word that I find might spark some ideas in. And then I write a whole list of my conceptual ideas that have nothing to do with light. And then I start to imagine how I can do those conceptual ideas in light. And then I take it back to the creative team and I tell them about these ideas and how I might portray that conceptual idea in light. And it's not until then that I start thinking about what lights I might use. And I think that's the same if I'm given an equipment list or if I'm given a hire list. The lights come kind of right at, they're not very high up. They come at the end in a way. And then I figure out what equipment I might need for that. Then I start thinking about, of course, where at the same time where they might need to be in order to achieve those looks or designs or to portray that idea. And then the plan comes. Now, when I started, I know you won't believe it, but we were still taught how to draw by hand, and I wasn't taught on the computer. And I did start to learn Vectorworks, and I found it a really kind of technical experience that I did not enjoy whatsoever. I'm not very technical. And so I actually now, I mean, it's perfect. It's a perfect way to draw your plan. I do miss scratching out my mistakes on my piece of tracing paper, but I pay people to draw my plans now. And that normally involves, please put these lights on and send me a section immediately, because I need to know if I'm going to be able to get the right beam angle, get it into the right place. And then I start to, and I often do sketch onto a lighting plan in hand and take photographs and send it to them. An X is a Fresnel, or a pink square is a 26-degree source 4, and they get little photos of sections of the plan, and then they draw it for me. And then they send it, and I note it, and I change my mind and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's probably now also how I then do theatre, and I work on opera. It starts with the ideas.
Great. Elliot, how about you?
So I try to not get too much of a yes stencil.
Oh, well, that is, Charlie.
I still use them all the time. Yeah.
So I wouldn't get too bogged down with ideas from reading the script. I'd wait until I sort of started to get model ideas or discussions with the set designer before I tried to get any preconceptions about what the piece should be. Because I tend to get bogged down in those and then don't want to let ideas go, which just wouldn't work with that particular production. And then for actually drafting the plan, I would work completely in 3D. So I would CAD the whole venue in 3 dimensions myself. And then I'd put the lights on in 3D space and work out if they would do the shots that I want and find the interesting angles and where I could possibly rig things. So I actually do a lot of the sort of interrogation of the design, the 3D space itself, which can be quite time consuming, but I now have a very large number of venues in 3D, which
that is very good news.
I never get one. Any venue. I think the RSC is the only place, and the National Theatre are the only 2 places which have sort of reasonable Vectorworks models for their venues.
Right. I think that's all starting to change a little bit with Preview starting to get into venues and things, and starting to do more 3D scans. Peter, how about yourself? What's your sort of approach and process?
I think I kind of share Rick's view of the palette approach. I mean, there's probably everybody knows I trained as a designer originally, not a lighting designer. So I know fuck all about lights basically. And the first thing I do is listen to the music or read the script. That applies to all areas of theatre. That's my first move, so that I have an opinion about the piece. Second thing I do is talk to the director and the designer, because I want to know what their opinion about the piece is. Third thing I want is to know what kind of space we're going to work in. So that's talking to the designer. I don't like drawing a lighting plan unless I actually have the plan on the space. And sometimes you have to really kind of ask for that, because sometimes that's not something which is provided for you. Sometimes I have to even draw it myself. But I like to look at a plan, and I like to see exactly where everything is before I draw it. So drawing the plan for me is actually quite a big part of the process. Obviously, I used to do it with the repeater graph and the I've got them somewhere, but I don't know where they are. But basically, I like to draw onto the plan. I hate to draw. Lots of people send you just a rig plan or a basic rig plan or just an empty theatre. I need to have a ground plan and a side elevation of the space, how it's going to be, because I regard that as being my palette to work on. So when I create a rig design, I'm creating a palette to work from, to be able to create ideas that are in tandem with the ideas of both the designer and the director, and also the script or the opera or the ballet. So that's kind of my starting point. I then try to build something which is going to be literally a palette that I can generate ideas that are going to be appropriate to that particular production from. I don't actually, I never pre-cue a show. I take loads of notes and things like that in rehearsal, and I kind of study the piece. I do all of that. I don't do very much visual referencing. I just try to respond directly to the piece as it's presented to me. Because I actually believe that the creative work that we do happens in the theatre. So the first part of the work for me is to create a palette that is going to service every possible idea that I can come up with once I'm in the space. Because I think that we have to work in space, and we have to work quite fast in the space sometimes. But I also believe that lighting design is the kind of last creative action, in a sense. You know, when we go into the theatre, it's about melding performance and space and surface. So what I do is I try to prepare myself for that, and then I go into space and I work with that. So I have to work quite intuitively in one sense. That's how I do it. That's how I've always done it. And that's how I will always do it. But that's the excitement, is actually when all those things come together. And if I've got the right palette, then I'm on foot. If I haven't, then I'm fucked. Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. It's really interesting to see the sort of similarities and differences in people's approaches. Is there, and this is a question I'll just sort of throw out to anyone who wants to answer it. Is there something that you've actually, I'll come back in a second. More importantly, what do you look for in a light? If you're choosing fixtures, if you've got a blank canvas and you can choose whatever you want, what are you looking for? Are you looking for output? Are you looking for color mixing? Is it gobos? Is it zoom range? What's kind of important to you?
Needs to be quiet.
Yeah, okay.
Get that bit and then get in trouble in the theatre when the director goes, "What's that noise?"
Yeah, absolutely, completely silent. Otherwise, no, I can't stand it. I think it's mean to the sound designer, if anything. If I'm impacting so often they're creating really subtle tones or pumping in air conditioning sounds just so they can whip it out at a final moment. And if you've got a discharge moving light churning away, you're ruining that. So it has to be quiet.
Agreed.
I have to join Elliot on that. It's the most important thing, I think, is a quiet moving light in theatre. And often I'm surprised that I'll come out of first preview and I'll say to the sound designer, "That was me, wasn't it?" And they're going, "Yes, it was you." And I go, "I'll sort that out tomorrow." And they're surprised that I actually not care more than them, but I actually care about the fact that my light has made a noise or moved at a certain time.
I often sit in theatre shows feeling really embarrassed of the noise of my lights, but I think it's something that I forget to think about because I came from dance and there's nearly always music. I forget to think about the noise of the lights, and yeah, I've been very embarrassed many a time. But the thing I need most in lights is shutters. I don't see the point of a profile unit without shutters. That's just not a profile. It's just a hard circle of light. So I want shutters every time.
Zoom range is the thing after quietness for me. I find most of the moving lights are just too small. 40 degrees is not enough. I want to be able to get a great wash out of one unit. I want 60 degrees. They used to be there and they've been taken away.
Well, I'm just gonna do High-End Systems little plug quickly.
Yeah,
there we go. I just thought I'd sneak that in. The solar frame family
you are
actually
high-end,
does go up to a 60-degree wash in both the profile and the wash.
Yeah.
So and they're actually pretty quiet as well. So I'm just going to give us a real big plug right there. I'll just throw that out there.
But just as a provocation, I believe the old VL 3500 used to go to nearly 70.
Yeah, 65,
And
68, I think.
It did, but you couldn't pull focus on those last 10 degreys. So if you were doing any gobo work.
What is that word? I've never heard it before.
You know me, I love a bit of gobo.
Of course, and they are useful on occasion, but rare occasion as far as I'm concerned. But I have seen you and other people use them most beautifully. So, to each their own. That's what's great.
Declan?
Yes, Mark.
Everything that's already been said, especially about the noise. I had the conductor. He managed to do one bar of the Marriage of Figure Overture and stopped and went, "What's that noise?" And everyone looked at me. God, that was scary. That's another story. But here's one thing that I want to add to the list. It has to fade up beautifully and fade down beautifully. There can be no boom at the end. I say, when I test a lighter, I say, now show it to me fading slowly. And then it can't have that drop off at the end. And the new LED stuff is much, much better at this now than it was.
Yeah, great.
That I was introduced to recently is to check the amount of, I'll call it spray. So you've got your main cone of light, and then how much spray is there that's just sort of coming out the front, but not actually in the beam, to catch on your borders and such like.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think we've struggled with as an industry, particularly with LED technology coming in. Is it was driven by the industries who have the money. So your rock and roll, your live concerts, your tourings, where of course that sort of thing is not a problem. And for the most part, and I'm generalizing here, of course, but for the most part, what I'll call the pancake fittings, the big LED circles with loads and loads of little sort of blueberries, on them, that they are the biggest offenders, and they are mostly what is available as wash lights these days. There are of course other versions, but 9 times out of 10, certainly when budgets start being cut, that's what you end up with as a wash light, and it's really hard to contain that still.
There's this thing between, I think you call it eye candy, whether you want something that's going to give you eye candy, or are we doing a show where everything is hidden behind borders, and we don't want to see those big frying pans with loads of blueberries, as you call them, in them. I generally like to see the effect of the light and not see the source. But of course, if we're doing a big stadium show, Durham, then that may be a different thing. Or the Albert Hall, where we see the rig, and you do something amazing with the beams of light. Mike, Durham.
Yeah, the client wants to see what they've paid for, Marco.
Pardon?
The client wants to see what they've paid for.
Yep.
That's what.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think the main thing for me is beam shaping. It's we're never asked to light anything round apart from mirror balls and Pavarotti, bless him. But beam shaping is everything. And barn doors used to be the first thing you put on a Fresnel, and you wouldn't really go into a theatre. It was a very poor theatre if your number one bar didn't have barn doors on it. And shutters, soft shutters, hard shutters, let's be able to light just the shape we're trying to illuminate. And then the big one for me in scale things is uniformity. There's nothing worse than bringing up a whole bank of lights and they're all a different version of white. Because as soon as you've got that problem, you're never going to get the colours to be uniform.
Absolutely.
So that's it for me. Beam shaping and uniformity of the sources. Which
I think is probably something that's gotten slightly better with LED sources. The discharge sources, it was anyone's guess really, because it was how well the rental shop was maintaining their lamps to a certain extent. Whereas I think it's a little better now with LED. I think there's a bit more care being paid to that sort of thing.
How about 5 shutters? I've been focusing, and I've often been asked for, that will be the 5th shutter.
Well, I think I would love to see a moving light go back to that double set of shutters at the old I think it was a 264 or 263. Used to have a soft set of shutters and a hard set of shutters.
264.
264. Thank you.
264. Yes, we had 8 shutters to play with.
I know. That's the problem is these days by default one of them tends to be fuzzy because you struggle to pull focus on all 4 at the same time. But
also
gobos, Rick.
Oh well. Yeah, I guess so. But Declan, I think you also bring up a very important other quality, which is edge, and the ability to make lights blend and different quality of lights, different types of lights blend. As in the early days of moving lights, you could always see the one or the three moving lights that you could afford were there, loud and proud, and making everything look different. And I want things to blend usually. We all know there are times for hard edge spots or hard edge shapes or hard edge gobos even. But I want the spots to be able to knock the edge off it, so it doesn't say, "Oh, look at me, I'm in a spotlight."
Oh yeah.
Let's
just come in there and just agree with that, Rick, so much. I mean, everybody hates the VL1000 now, although it's actually served very well for many years, in my opinion. But the first input on that is like nothing that has ever been produced in any other moving light. I mean, when you were doing a play, you could actually bring in the frost over 60 seconds, move the light, and then ease the frost out again. And it blew it apart so much. And nothing else does that, even now, that I know of.
Again, I'm going to go out there and give us another little plug. The new Heinz Systems. Now of course I've started this, and I'm going to get the product name wrong. High Beam 3000, Solar Beam 3000. Oh, Graham, I might need some help.
High Beam 3000.
High Beam 3000. Thank you. That has 3 different frosts. It has a really clever variable frost system, which is just beautiful.
Okay, and do they come in beautifully?
Solar High Beam 3000. There we go. I've just been corrected by the team.
Yeah,
thank you.
They come in
really slowly.
They are absolutely gorgeous. It really is lovely. It's a very, very clever system.
Question, Jack, does it come in over 60 seconds or more?
I haven't timed it, but I will do that as soon as we can get back into the office and into our demo room.
That was the one thing that always sold me on the 1000. The fact that you could just kind of like do that and melt a light and then move it and then bring it back out again. I mean, beautiful. And nobody else has ever done that. And very fucked up that they never developed that.
Fair enough. Which actually leads me on to my next question. Is there, nice little segue, thank you. Is there something that you really want to be able to do that you feel the current technology is prohibiting? Whether it's on a control side of things, on a fixture side of things.
I wish pixel mapping was easier. I wish there were a way I, as the lighting designer, could draw something and it would, maybe there is, but I certainly don't know that there is. I wish that were a thing.
So I'm furiously making notes here of all your ideas, and I'm just going to copyright them.
Yeah, I would say,
send you royalties.
I would agree. I want pixel mapping to get better, and so that I can do things that are more organic.
Yeah.
And rather than based on numbers. So that, even drawing, I mean, my programmer and I have sat there drawing shapes and it never comes out like that. But yeah, I think pixel mapping's got to get better.
I'd like a little panel. I know that you can make button panels and things, but I'd like a little panel that I can just put in my rucksack that gives me the encoders and a few little cheeky things that I get so frustrated going right, left, yes, no, oh, no, you're not listening to me properly. Can you not see what I'm trying to light? So I could just fiddle myself and then go, right, do whatever you need to do now to make that.
Store that, yeah.
It gets so frustrating not being able to just tweak the light.
But Joe, is that you talking to a programmer?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I don't know if this is any use at all, but I mean, I explain to my programmer from the very beginning that I will talk to the moving light as if it was a camera. So I will talk to the moving light from its point of view. So when I say pan left, that means the light pans left. When I say tip up, it tips up. Nothing to do with stage right or stage left or anything like that. Now, I find that most programmers get that. Explain.
Well, I always make sure the lights are set correctly, as you say, so you're focusing them from behind. But I find a lot of in-house programmers just don't engage with the show in the same way. And that, I think, it's partly that is an issue rather than
you can see me
what the desk is doing. So if I could just tweak, select that channel, and I can see where I want to capture that actor, and I can just nudge my little wheel and then go update the preset, or even give me the update preset.
There might actually be a solution for that, Joe. We have something which is called the Light Hack, which is basically a little kit, and you can assemble your own set of encoders, and it just networks into the console, and you can map whatever parameters you want onto those encoders.
Can I?
I'll send you the link after the meeting.
Listen, just coming back in on that. I mean, I'm with Joe on this totally. I mean, I want to be able to say go left on a light, and the light goes left. Can it do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing that I think is it is about to be released really soon. We've been in beta for a long time. The new release for EOS version 3.0, which introduces the augmented, which is the virtual reality sort of 3D wing to the console. And that very much gives you a 3D programming environment, and you can actually be quite specific and point anywhere on the screen where you want to be. I want you there, I want you there, I want you there. So that might go a long way to solving that problem.
Okay, that's great, but I want to say to my programmer, pan left, and they go left. I think what Joe's saying is, in lots of instances, you say pan left, and they go the wrong way.
That also, I think, comes down to the operator and the programmer who should have it all set up that they know which way the encoders should be working.
Okay. I think what I'm saying is, let's have a system where moving lights work. That's left, that's right.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Declan, it's probably a bit old-fashioned, but if the light is going to have animation in it, I want to be able to orientate the animation. And I think somebody's got a copyright on it because some of the moving lights can't do it. So at a very basic level, if we're doing rippling water, they all need to be able to ripple in the same orientation. Or if we're doing fire, it's the other way. And sometimes that's a problem, and it's just a bit disappointing that the light could actually do something like that, but it can't orientate effectively. Am I making any sense?
I think so. He says confidently.
Fire being vertical and water being horizontal, depending on what surface you're hitting. And Rick's maybe going to help me out there, but at a shoot event I was at in January, not every light could do that.
Yeah, I've not experienced it. Someone's just put on the chat that Mac Encores are good for that, and I certainly have played around with Mac Encores and had, when I've been doing a less realistic effect, and thought, oh yeah, it looks good that way, but let's try it another way, and it looks good that way. So they've been good at that for me. I was just going to say that often I find, and I'm sure that the stuff that where Durham's doing it, it's easy. Probably he's got the systems to do it, but in a theater situation where you're doing a backlight wash and you want it to be diagonal from one side, and then you want it the same light doing the exact opposite from the other side, and sometimes they just don't. It seems like there will be an easy way to make them mirror each other, or you can tell them how to mirror each other as just a starting point. And it seems that that's much more complicated than anybody has been able to get their head around. And I don't know why, but it seems like it should be rather simple, that you could somehow give it 4 compass points and then make it up, choose which points you want it to be opposite of another unit.
Is it not a question of how symmetrical your rig is?
Supposedly the rig is symmetric. In these cases, supposedly the rig is symmetric. I wouldn't say it's going to be perfect, and you're not going to want to nudge it. But you wouldn't have to start from scratch every time. You just should be able to put in a macro, I guess is what it's called, to make light 1 and light 8, well, probably light 7, because they should always be odd numbers, do the opposite of each other. It seems that should be possible. I think that worked programmers probably invented those macros, but it shouldn't have to be a proprietary programmer issue, should it? Question.
No, I guess not. I mean, there's probably a whole separate conversation to be had in terms of programmers and setup of consoles and things like that.
I mean, I get that sometimes, and I find that some programmers can do it, and then some will actually say, "Oh, I tried it, but it didn't work."
I'm noticing the same. Miguel in the chat is saying that it's possible, but if it's prep.
It's also tricky, of course, because that sort of thing works, and if until somebody has done a pan or tilt invert on one fixture in the rig or something like that.
If people thought it was useful, we could.
Again, sorry, I lost you a little bit there. Elliot, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add in.
Well, on the EOS, you can't do additive. You can't have 2 effects running on the same channel, as far as I'm aware. Like, for example, on the MA, you could have 2 intensity effects, which would be running at the same time. So you could have one doing the beat on the front of every bar, as well as having a sine wave effect across the whole thing. So they could be doing a beat on top of a background effect.
Good idea.
And that's one thing which MA can do, which EOS can't.
Well, we have to give them something.
I know. You've got they've got the effect. Had to be something. But yeah, that's something I found slightly irritating, and I normally had to get something like OSC or MIDI triggers from Sound in order to get them to fire me a second cue stack to hit beats or something. I found ways around it, but it would be nice to have that integrated at some point.
There's a bit of a discussion going on about that on chat, but
yeah.
Then I just see, going back to Matilda, Matilda Crucial asking, why are designers always so short-tempered when it comes to moving light? That's to move it left. She says 1 second more and it would work. Sometimes it's better to take a breath and say no the other way, in my opinion, she said. Well, Matilda, my dentist said, you realise that you grind your teeth in your sleep. I said, no, I don't do it in my sleep. I do it during the day. And that's while I'm waiting for the light to go in the direction.
I mean, I think
patience is always a virtue.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But it's really tricky.
It is tricky.
Isn't it really tricky? Because we're all under so much time pressure when we're working. So for a programmer, we jump in too quickly when we haven't seen something we want quickly. I think we all have to understand that we're all working under immense time pressures all the time. So as short tempo, it does happen.
It is very interesting because all of us at different times, I think, have taken in our own programmers who we have a shorthand with, and at other times we go in and we have to work with the person that we're provided with, and that doesn't always work out so well. Sometimes it's great, but not always. And I ask the question, if I'm going into a theatre, and this happened to me in another country quite recently, I said, how are your programmers? And they said, they're very, very good. I said, oh, great. Are they as good or better than, and I named another city in that country, and they went, oh, they're much better than that city. I said, good, because I didn't have a very high view of the other city.
Did you ask them if they spoke English?
What?
Did you ask them if they spoke English?
No, I wasn't going to worry about that because I was going to speak in the local language.
Excellent.
I don't want people blaming their crap programming on the fact that they had to understand my English. That wasn't the problem. But what I'm really getting at is that the technical management's interpretation of how good their programmer was and my expectation was very, very different. And that is where, Matilda, I had to wait more than 1 second for the light to go in the right direction. I ground my teeth.
We've had a question come in from Louisa. What do you look for? What skills do you prefer in a programmer, aside from obviously knowledge of the console? Because let's assume that they know the console. What other key skills do you think should be there?
They've got to have a good sense of humour. We're in the dark for so long together. If they can't laugh, then what's the point? We're all doing
bad lighting.
I like a programmer who can understand when I go, no, it needs to go like this, and they can interpret that.
I do that with my effects. I want it to go doop 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 doop.
Yeah.
Over to you. Thank you.
So they have a creative programmer who can kind of interpret you and can also input. They can often say to me, but what about this? This might be better, at the right time. They have to know when to speak and when to just let me go through.
I don't know if it's changed more recently in America, because I see hello from New York. It's just come in there. I used to find that when I worked in America, I was expected to speak in syntax and dictate everything in syntax that I wanted to happen. If we do that to a British programmer, they get pretty hacked off. So I think they prefer us to just give them a bit of wiggling and what have you.
Well, yes, I mean, I kind of agree with that, Mark. But at the same time, I think you kind of offer up something to a programmer. You kind of want them to interpret. Okay, all of that, waving the arms, Lucy, great, I understand totally. But at the same time, what I want from a programmer is somebody who has eyes. I want somebody who sees the stage, not just the screen. I've worked with programmers who kind of look at a screen and they go, I'm sorry, it's not happening on the screen. I'm saying, excuse me, there's no light on stage. And I have literally experienced that. Because they look at the screen and believe it. I want a programmer who sees what I'm doing and actually understands it, and then understands, therefore, what the next move is going to be. That's what we want from a programmer. We want somebody who's able to understand what we're trying to achieve and has the technical ability to achieve that. That's what you want. And it's a creative role. Make no mistake, it's like an editor in film. It's exactly like working with film, and you work with an editor and they go, sorry, I think that cut should just be 3 frames earlier. That's what you want from a programmer.
I couldn't agree more, Peter. I mean, somebody has said that, why do we get frustrated with programmers? And I think it's often because you don't feel that they're watching the same show that you're watching. And that's where the frustration comes from, because to me they're a collaborative partner and I can't do the show without them. And
Absolutely.
We're a team working together, and that's how I start that process of dialogue. Lucy talked about dialogue. I start it from walking on stage when I start focusing, going, this is how we're here to make this show, and if you can think of a better place to put this light to make what I'm trying to do, or I'm doing 8 across doing exactly the same thing, I expect the focusers to have as much creativity and joy of making a general cover look beautiful together as me helping instruct them put together. And that has now moved into moving lights. And, we get frustrated when, say, you've got one moving light on stage and you're going, move it to the left, and the programmer is going, what? And you go, there's only one light on stage and it's obviously not hitting that, whatever you're trying to hit. And that's where the frustration comes up. when we're not working as a creative team together.
I think that's right. I think it's a creative process right down to the last person who puts the last plug in the socket.
Yeah.
Thank you. So just a couple more questions. I know we've gone on a little longer than planned. So just a couple more questions.
Catherine, sorry, can I just drop one in about programmers?
Please.
For me, the most important thing is tolerance of change and understanding the lighting designer's rapport and interaction with the creative team. And quite often in my world, that the programmer might spend with 3 others 5 hours working on a really complex sequence, and the next day it's cut, gone, history. And I can go in there and say, right guys, that's absolutely beautiful, now bin it, we're going to do something else. And the really good programmers just laugh it off. The bad ones... Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So last couple of questions. Just coming back slightly more to sort of WYSIWYG and 3D and visualization, do we think that given the state of the world at the moment, and I don't want to go too deeply into the COVID thing, but just this one quick touch on this, while we're all coming out of this, do you think we're going to be living in a 3D world more than we have been?
I bloody hope not.
Me too.
Well, me 3, but I've just done a musical for Guildhall, which was what I believe was the first virtual musical ever. And whilst it was lovely to be doing lights from the comfort of my home, it was awful not to be in a theatre. It was really awful, and actually more painful than I thought it would be.
It's a collaboration. We have to work together.
Just to say, there have been brilliant things, and I mean, artists will always invent and make wonderful things to happen. Staged, I think, is one of those examples, if you've not seen it, but it's a brilliant piece of work. We'll always go on making brilliant pieces of work, but I'm not interested in working in a theatre that's socially distanced or, restricted by these things. To be honest, I'd rather wait. I don't know what else to say.
My favourite thing is sitting in that audience on that first preview and watching the show and understanding what we've made work and not work because of the complete absorption and reactions of the audience that we're sitting with. You can't get that anywhere else, I don't think.
I think that's true. And I just recently tweeted, I'm one of the fortunate people who Vienna State Opera are going to open again in September, the beginning of September. They're going to open again with one of our pieces of work. A UK piece of work is going to reopen the Vienna State Opera. They're going to play to 1,200 people. I just came off a Zoom meeting with them. They've managed to make it work in a way that the UK is completely screwed up. And I'm kind of very proud of that, but I'm also very ashamed of what's going on in the UK at the same time. We should not be sad. We should be angry. This is a ridiculous situation, and it should not exist. The Germans are putting €1 billion into reviving the arts. We are putting nothing. End of statement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So one last question, and I'll whip through all the panel. I'll give you all a chance to answer this one. Your favorite tip or your favorite trick? Something that, what's your little sort of trick that you keep up your sleeve? And I'll start with you, Peter, if that's all right, because you're sort of first on my screen.
Oh, geez.
Sorry. Give everyone else a chance to think about it while you go through it.
Very much. Okay, okay. Look back to what you've done and then do something different.
Nice. Elliot?
Don't be a dick. We'll do this job because we love it, and there's no place to be bullying or anything or belittling people at work. It should be a joy to go to work, and occasionally there is a need to throw your toys out the pram, but just don't be a dick.
Fair enough.
Right.
Lucy.
I don't know. I mean, Elliot, that's absolutely fair play. I would, and immediately thought, yes, be nice. You know, I find that I get what I need by maintaining my temper and, yeah, explaining rather than shouting. And if I'm nice to people, they're nice back. And I like people being nice to me. It makes me relax and be creative and take risks. If I'm having to deal with the kind of narky technicians or somebody who's upset about something, then I kind of concentrate on that more than I concentrate on what I'm trying to paint on the stage. So.
Great. Joe.
Oh, I've got what? Sorry, can I say one last thing?
Yeah, of course.
Work at La Scala Milan is my other tip.
Yeah, I would second that.
Be inclusive. Explain to your team what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do, from everybody, from the minute you walk into the space to start creating the work. I always find if I'm inclusive of the show that I'm trying to create, it's much easier to create it. And I'd follow that up with saying, don't ever be forced to rush into focusing. Make sure you focus your rig how you want it, because that's your one time to really create what you want to do with the lights. So I spend my time focusing. I can always plot whenever, is my technique.
Really good tip.
Thank you, Joe. Durham.
Be nice to people on the way up, because you might meet them on the way down. If you do have a modicum of success, make sure you keep egos at the right end of the spotlight. And finally, if you work abroad a lot, get some pictograms, or else you can't find steak and chips when it goes to the restaurant. Most important pass ever. Thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Rick.
Well, my big tip is try not to bullshit too much, because people smell it really quickly. And I'll tell the story that many years ago, when I took a job which I assumed was a studio theatre job, and turned out to be in the main house of the Liverpool Rep. The lovely Joe Town happened to be the chief electrician then, and I was the lighting designer who had only ever worked in studios before. I literally didn't know what some of the lights were called. I didn't know what the positions were called. I was pretty damn stupid. I didn't even remember I don't think I even knew how to turn on the headsets, because I'd never worn them before. And I just had to ask for help. And I hope by asking the people who knew what they called that position and what they called those lights, and by asking for help with the headsets, I didn't look like an idiot. I just looked like someone who was valuing their knowledge of how to work in their building. Try and remember that.
Verdict?
Sorry?
Joe, what's the verdict?
Oh, it was a pretty good job. It was rather beautiful, I have to say. And they were very mean. They gave him a massive turf set that we could hardly access at all. It was a nightmare. You did a lovely job, Rick.
Oh, well, thank you. I barely remember it, but I remember the experience of being terrified, and at least not retreating into trying to pretend that I knew things that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Somebody else will know them. And you're all, as you say, you're all trying to do the same job together. And by using people's knowledge and their experience and valuing that, I think we had a better working relationship than we might have had otherwise.
Brilliant, thank you. Charlie, how about you?
I mean, I echo the rest of the panel. Be kind, have fun. It's a job we love. You must enjoy it. And don't use too much front light. That's my tip.
Fair enough.
John.
Okay.
I think like a bit of front light for the curtain calls, though.
Oh yeah, perhaps for a curtain call. Okay.
Only if you've got spare lanterns, though. Only if you've got a few spare lights.
Yeah.
I love front of house. I don't know what your problem is.
I can remember Rick Fisher was already a very eminent lighting designer, and he arrived at the National Theatre. And Charlie, he was presented with a set that had a ceiling and walls, and he said to me, "I'm going to have to use front of house." which will be a new experience for me. And you did a marvellous job, Rick. I think it was What the Butler Saw, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a completely sealed unit.
Yeah. My offering, Declan, would be that, you know, if you've ever got stuck and you feel you're going around in circles and it's just not happening, to say to the director or the choreographer, can you just leave that with me? Let's move on and let's come back to that tomorrow. And I'll think about it overnight, or I'll talk to other people. I'll probably sleep on it. And in the morning, I'll know what to do. Don't get stuck. Keep on going. And get back.
Don't get stuck.
Right words, Marco.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We have had one more question come in, if the panel is okay to hang around for another couple of minutes. I know we're a little over our time. One last question from Alan. He wants to know everybody's opinion on formal training. Should it happen? Have you been trained? And I know we're possibly going down a rabbit hole here, so let's, you know, but what's your thought?
I'm not convinced it's the be-all and end-all, especially for a lighting designer. I think there are other members of the lighting department that need certain amounts of training, but I think you have to have a skill for it. You have to have an eye for it, and no amount of formal training is going to give you that eye. Controversial. I hope it's not controversial.
No, I think that's absolutely fair.
I would totally agree with that, Lucy. I think if you've got the eye and you want to go to university, that eye can be trained, and language and development and skills can be developed within your own creativity, but it's not going to give you that creativity.
But I think you can also learn those things on the job, can't you, Joe?
Well, I did, yes. I was an apprentice, so yeah, I learned on the job. Watching some amazing people I would never have had the opportunity to watch if I hadn't. And my job was to sit behind the light designer on every production week as part of the apprenticeship and provide them with their tea, coffee, beers and cigarettes. That's how long ago it was.
You probably learned more from sitting in that position than you could ever have done being in a classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're all of us involved in training at some level or another. And certainly when I started, there were no courses whatsoever. And we built up a network of peers and friends who were directors and designers, flymen, production managers, who we'd meet later in our career. I think the unfortunate thing about sitting 20 lighting designers together in a room is you're then in a situation where you're never going to work with those peers again, ever. So if you're doing a course, they're valid, of course they are, but go out and get real life experience and build up a network of friends and people who appreciate you for who you are and what you can do.
Hello.
Brilliant. Hi, Peter.
It's just me. I'd just like to say that I think that lighting design is an area. It's an area that's a kind of aesthetic development, and I think that it's a mistake to think of it as being a kind of training area only for theatre. I think there's a place for training people in terms of lighting design as a kind of art form in terms of the medium of expression that it is. But I think there's a confusion between that and actually training people to be lighting designers for the theatre. I think occupies a different position, a position that possibly relates to drama courses, where it is at the moment. I think there's a great danger that we produce too many people who want to simply be lighting designers, but I think there's also a kind of missing area where we need to actually explore the area of lighting as an area of aesthetic. And that's quite different. So I think it's complicated. It's not a simple question. Should we be training more lighting designers? The answer probably is no to that. Anyway,
Rick,
this is a bigger conversation.
Yeah, but I would just say that I know particularly I get asked this question a lot, particularly in America when I'm there. what sort of course should people go on? And actually in Britain too. And I think there are different, you should think different, there are different paths, whether or not you're the kind of person who needs to have or wants to have other lighting people around them and then go to a course or a college where there are quite a big lighting training, and there are some very good ones. Or there are other people who actually benefit from going to a course or a training where it's more general, and you might be one of the only lighting people there, and you may have a chance to do more lighting in that situation and learn from doing, as opposed to not having that support of a lot of people who are interested in what you're interested in. Does that make any sense?
It does, absolutely.
I came through a Bachelor of Arts degree where there was almost no technical theater training whatsoever, but I got to do lots of different things, including a bit of lighting, and I think that made me the kind of collaborator that I have become, for better or for ill. But I see other people who really thrive in having a large group of people who are really obsessed about lighting, talking about it, experimenting, egging each other on to do different, better, bigger things. So I think you have to understand a little bit of your own personality about when you're examining what sort of training route to take, how you'll flourish.
I mean,
Brilliant.
just to very quickly add into that, I mean, I trained as a stage designer, not a lighting designer. And that kind of evolved because of the aesthetic, not because of any kind of available training. So I think what Rick's saying is very true.
Thank you. So thank you very much, everybody. I know we've gone a little bit over our planned time, but I just want to say thank you very much to everyone on the panel for joining us. I think it's been a really great session. Thank you for everyone who's attended the session and sticking out with us. I know we ran a little over time. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you giving up your Friday evening to be with us. Light Bytes is a regular thing. It will become a more regular thing as this develops. So thank you again. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And yeah, hopefully we'll all see each other again in the same room as soon as we possibly can.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you again for our next event on the 4th of September. Have a good weekend.